Well, hello and welcome to the very first edition of Design for Living. This is our brand new video blog, formerly known as The Overcomer. And I'm Dr. John Hawkins, Sr., and I'm your host for today, as well as the president of Gateway Counseling Center, located right here in Boynton Beach, Florida. Uh, our goal in renaming the blog and kind of rebranding things is to focus more on really what we say the purpose of our counseling center is. It's where mental health meets personal growth. I just want to help people deal with the past issues of their life, make them stronger so they can go on and live the best life they can have now, the life that has been designed for them by God. So, what we're going to do is take timeless principles that have proven to be successful in people's lives, along with the wisdom of solid mental health principles to help people uh, have better relationships, a stronger self image, and just help us in our daily moods. You know, those things like depression and anxiety and sometimes anger that get in the way of feeling like we really have a purposeful life. And that's what our goal is. And I hope you'll find this helpful and beneficial as you tune in as we bring you this broadcast each week. Now, previously, we had been talking to you about the subject of shame and self criticism, and the differences of those. And so we have taken a look so far about how shame will produce self-criticism, that harsh voice that's always, attacking you. And we've talked about three different types of perfectionism that goes along with that self-criticism and what causes perfectionism. And today we want to kind of build on that a little bit. We want to look at the psychology of self-criticism and shame's role, in that. Now, brain science tells us that the negative always outweighs the positive in our life. In other words, it takes a deeper root. It more heavily solidifies in there. When you say something negative to somebody, they tend to remember that more than when you say something positive, to them. And so our failures get stored very deeply into our unconscious brain. And, in the past, that could have been helpful, when we were out there living in, a wild country and we wanted to stay alive. And so we wanted to learn from our mistakes, learn what snakes are poisonous and which ones aren't, and what things you could eat out of nature and which ones you don't want to, eat. Uh, Today, things are a lot easier, for us, but the truth is still there. In other words, those negative things will still stick more than the positives. I always say, in a way of using it in your life, we tend to remember more from the mistakes that we made, from the things that we get, right. But that inner self-critical voice isn't very happy or healthy to us. It doesn't make us happy either when you think about it. It's just like having somebody walking around with you and they're constantly being negative. They're constantly telling you everything that's wrong with you and complaining about it. After a while, you're just going to want to, punch them, or lose them as a friend. It's like you're going to dread when they come around. Well, when it's just me and I'm that voice, that's going to be really depressing, to myself. And so we want to be able to recognize, first of all, the difference between shame and guilt and how perfectionism plays that role. Because guilt says I did something wrong, whereas shame says I am wrong. It's that difference between I made a mistake and I am a mistake. So that shame, that's just self-condemnation. That doesn't help anything, and so we want to be able to get rid of that in our life. But so often, people that are perfectionistic, they tend to carry a lot of shame because they're trying to live up to a standard that's impossible. No one can be, perfect. And so, again, that will just constantly weigh on them because whatever they did isn't quite good enough. They never can feel like that. They can't enjoy that sense of accomplishment. And so, what we want to understand today is how to unlearn shame a little bit. So, today we're going to talk about the perfectionism procrastination cycle. And so, the way this goes is you're faced with a task that's really important. It really matters to you. And you know, okay, there's a lot riding on this. I got to get this done. But because it's so important and you have so much riding on that, the stakes of imperfection feel enormous to you. Like, I can't afford to mess this up. And so I delay and I don't get started because I'm worried that it's going to be less than perfect. I'm not going to produce the results that I want. And then that delay creates more guilt in my life because I know I should be going on this. The clock is ticking. I see the deadline approaching and I'm not doing anything. And that just increases the pressure. And then the pressure makes me feel it even harder to get started. So it just becomes a vicious cycle, with people. And so it's that idea, the fear of the mistakes creates that harsh self-evaluation, and we get decision paralysis. I can't decide what to do first. I can't think about what to begin. What is the right way? What is the perfect way for this one acceptable outcome? And so every starting point feels wrong to me. Every time I get ready to think about it, it just seems like, well, this start that I'm making, it is not going to be good enough. And so it's the perfectionism that causes the procrastination. And so I have this fear that, okay, people aren't going to like it. They're not going to approve it. It's not going to be good enough. Increases the pressure and it drives people crazy. This vicious negative cycle. So, how do you break that cycle? Well, part of it is to lower the stakes, is to realize the stuff that I'm looking at is like the whole world depends on this, or my whole future depends on this. Usually isn't correct. But the big part is you have to realize I just need to start. I just need to put something out there. Now, think about that's how business works. If you have a product and if you're waiting to put that product or to launch it for it to be perfect, it'll never launch. And then someone else will come along and they will go ahead and launch that product that's less than perfect in your eyes, but that was the same idea that you had, only now they start selling a lot of it, become successful in it. They have the advantage of being the first starter. And then guess what they do? They realize it isn't perfect. Maybe they get feedback from people, or they designed it that way, and said, hey, here, we're going to send this out to our beta audience. And then they'll come out with version 2.0, and then they'll improve on that and come out with 3.0, or maybe some incremental versions, 3.1, 3.2. And they just keep improving it, and you haven't even begun at all. And thinking like, well, I had that same idea. I could really be successful or wealthy, but you just didn't start. Now, you don't want it to be a disaster. You have to get it to a certain level, but you have to be able to say, you know what, this is good enough to start. This is good enough that it will do a certain job, people will like it, and then when we put the next version out with the improvements, they'll want to come back again. They always advertise that, remember, on food boxes, new and improved. New and improved. Well, how much did they really improve it? And it's a great marketing scheme, because people want the latest and the greatest. So if I liked 1.0, even though the people that created it thought, oh, this really isn't, perfect, then, I got to have 2.0 now that it, came out. And how many editions of the iPhone have been out there? I don't even know. I don't even keep track. I don't know if we're at 17 or 25 or where we're at, but we just keep, putting them out there. But you had to come out with 1.0 to start with. So you've got to get to that point where you realize, you know what, this is good enough. And the problem with the perfectionism, it's going to affect your mental health. In other words, and it will affect your physical health because those things go together. And so that stress of that perfectionism, that's going to create anxiety, possibly OCD, depression, because anxiety and depression go together. And that's not going to be any fun at all, in your life. And it's all because you're trying to do something, but you're demanding of yourself, it's got to be perfect. No, it doesn't have to be perfect because perfection is an impossibility. It's never going to be done for you. You're never going to be able to step back and look at it and say, wow, that was great. I looked at it. You'll always see something wrong with it, where other people are looking at it and say, wow, that's great. And so it's understanding what goes on with that and the impact that has on my life. And then it can create other things besides just, the mood disorders. It can lead to burnout, because I had this pressure of this fear of mistakes. And so my harsh inner critic, starts grinding away at me because I feel like, if I criticize myself, I'll beat my other critics to the punch. And, maybe other critics weren't even going to say anything. Some people are just critical by nature and they're envious and they're jealous and they're not going to like anything that you put out. You can't worry about those folks because there's no, pleasing them. But what happens to people, you see this in sports, you see it in a lot of areas where people have all this talent, all this skill. They start off, boom, they make a bang and they're doing great. And then suddenly they quit, they retire. They'll say, well, I just burn out. I couldn't take it anymore. Why? Because they put this unnecessary pressure on themselves to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. And so maybe they cut short a career, a project, something they really enjoyed because they just didn't know how to back off from perfectionism and the shame that creates and the stress that creates. And then along with that can create sleep disruption and disorders. People get insomnia and they lay awake at night just ruminating on negative thoughts about what they did and what didn't go right and how it could have been better, instead of just being able to say, hey, I did my best, I'm happy with that, I'm going to get a good night's sleep. And then sometimes in some people that can turn to eating disorders, which is just, often another way to try to get some control in your life. So our whole nervous system gets on this constant stress alert, this constant hypervigilance that we're not made to sustain in our life. And it's going to lead to health problems because, the cortisol is going to be sky high and that's going to increase inflammation in my body. It's going to lower my immune system. It's the cause for most sickness that, that people have. And so you see, this will turn into a lot of issues and problems in my life. Now, if faith is a part of your healing journey, you can pull that in. This is a great place to do it. Psalm 34:18 says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. In other words, realizing, hey, I feel pretty crushed in my spirit right now. I feel pretty broken right now because I feel like I'm not putting out something that's perfect. Well, guess what? God says he's extra close to people like that. Why don't you realize that God isn't expecting you to be perfect and get the comfort that you need from him in that? Anything that will help you bring that pressure, take that pressure off of yourself. In a couple of our next broadcasts, we're going to talk about how perfectionism impacts your relationships in your daily life, how it impacts particularly high achievers and certain groups, Um, it's not wrong to be a high achiever. You just want to be sure that I'm not let perfectionism sneak in there. And we'll talk some about, you know, how do we overcome that? How do we deal, with that? So hopefully this has been a little bit of a help. We have a rather extensive article on it on our website, on the written blog. So you can just go to gatewaycounselingcenter.com and check that out. And you can read the written blog and have something that you can kind of go over and hang on to. And if we can be any help to you, feel free to contact us at gatewaycounseling.com. We're here in Florida, but we counsel people, really all over the world. Technologies can be a great thing today. Well, hope that we're helping you with some principles that will help you in your life in a practical way, help you design the life that God desires for you. So, till next time, God bless you and have a good rest of the day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye now.